Max Williams, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the spring season of this, the 21st year of the Arts Café-Mystic. April is National Poetry Month, though some of you may be remembering that T.S. Eliot famously declared that April is the cruelest month. Or you may be remembering that Shakespeare referred to the uncertain glory of an April day. Or that Orwell began 1984 by announcing it was a bright, cold day in April, and the clocks were striking 13. Here, with your indulgence, is a poem about poets and poetry. You may know it. In my craft or sullen art, exercised in the still night, when only the moon rages, and the lovers lie abed with all their griefs in their arms, I labor by singing light, not for ambition or bread, or the strut and trade of charms on the ivory stages, but for the common wages of their most secret heart. Not for the proud man apart from the raging moon I write on these spindrift pages, nor the towering dead with their nightingales and psalms, but for the lovers, their arms round the griefs of the ages, who pay no praise or wages, nor heed my craft or art. That was Dylan Thomas. Some of you were no doubt made to read that poem in college. But you see, I can think of no better way to celebrate Poetry Month than to learn by heart a poem that touches you. Really, try it. You'll see for yourself that saying a poem you know out loud while driving in your car or waiting to fall asleep at night will give you pleasure and comfort. And nothing is more certain to stop a dinner party than the recital of a poem. That's probably why I'm invited to so few dinner parties, you're thinking. For those of you new to the Arts Cafe, in addition to this foolishness you've thus far endured, our mission is to present the nation's most celebrated poets and writers, along with New England's best musicians, in programs that lift your spirits and deepen your minds. And if we have a little fun along the way, so much the better. Before we get started, I command of you to remove your cell phones from your pockets or purses. And holding it before you in this way, bitterly curse it for the tyranny it exercises over your lives. Or at least switch it off for the duration of the show. So let's get on with it. Our opening voice tonight is the accomplished Connecticut-based poet, Elizabeth Thomas. Ms. Thomas has published 2 fine books of poems, including Front of the Classroom and Full Circle. She is also the author of If Only Red Could Talk, a book on writing for youth and teachers. As a slam poetry performer, she competed on the Connecticut national team and for the U.S. team, which performed in Sweden. Ms. Thomas is also the founder of Upwards of Poetry, which creates and promotes programs for young writers and educators. In this vein, she works with Connecticut Commission for Culture, the Bushnell Center, and the Greater Hartford Arts Council, among others. She has even been poet in residence at the United Arab Emirates University outside of Dubai. But it's Ms. Thomas's poetry that concerns us tonight, and you will hear from her poems of beguiling directness, a wry humor, and offhand wisdom of a poet who believes in the power of poetry to enlighten and heal. As she says in one of her poems, it's not easy taking care of the world. Here's a poet who has signed up for the job, and won't you please welcome Elizabeth Thomas.
Thank you. So, I've spent the last week writing poetry with fifth graders in Windsor, and I'd like to start in the classroom. So, this is a poem that I did not write. This is lines from poetry that the students have written about what poetry is to them. And I just put them together in a format that makes it sound like it goes together. Poetry is. Poetry is a feather tickling your brain, or like digging a hole with a toothpick. It's like playing basketball in high-heeled shoes. Poetry is a butterfly's kiss and sounds like the crunch of a potato chip. It is a sign you drive by and then you want to turn around to find out what it said. It sounds like a mysterious squeak or bump in your house when you are all alone and the lights are off. Poetry smells like grandma's coffee first thing in the morning. The sound of traffic makes me think of poetry. Poetry pops like a pink balloon, like boxes beating, blue notes repeating. It is the sharp edge of a knife. It's fun and funny, makes my nose runny. It's giggable and jiggable, and I have to do this because I told the kids who wrote the line I would, and completely wiggable, like you and me. Poetry smells like my brother's breath when he doesn't brush his teeth. It's like falling down on gravel, or like a shark biting off your finger. Poetry can calm me down when I'm about to hit my little sister. It can break me into a million pieces, and then poetry can put me back together again. It gives me nightmares, and yes, poetry also fills my dreams. Thank you. Okay. And this is my favorite poem. Revelation. His t-shirt says, I am God. And I think, well, my lucky day, I'll run over, shake his hand, ask for an autograph. I might never have this chance again. But as God sits there waiting to step into the vice principal's office, I look closely at his faded t-shirt, 2 sizes too big, sneakers older than he is, thin legs swinging barely long enough to reach the floor. Dirty hands massaging a dirty forehead. And think, this is not God. This is a little boy who maybe swore in the lavatory or tussled on the playground. A child who probably forgot to eat breakfast, did not expect a goodbye kiss. When he gets home from school today, he will let himself in with the key that hangs around his neck. He might help himself to Twinkies and a glass of Coke, a microwave pizza in front of the TV. Struggling to raise his head, the circles under his eyes slope down toward his chin, pick up the lines around his mouth and carry it down as well. It's not easy taking care of the world. Using the back of his hand, he trails snot and tears across his face, into his hair, which heads out in all directions as if just lifted from a pillow. He looks neglected, like homework after a long weekend. This boy ain't been loved in a long time. I want to walk over, kneel on both knees, use my sleeve to clean his cheeks, tie his sneakers. He looks up, and in his eyes, I see my own son. Unable to look away, I want to say something, make some excuse, beg for forgiveness. But this is God. What can I possibly say that he does not already know? Thank you. Thank you. So, I don't generally try to rhyme much in my poems, but this poem kind of put itself together that way, and it's called Hear Me. Lately, I listen to the lives of our children, the loners and lost ones, the poets and prophets, the lines that they write with clenched teeth and pens, neon green fingernails chewed raw and gritty, twisted lines traveled like dirt roads and veins. Lately, I listen, don't know how they journey, past splintering bombs and standardized tests, each stutter breath filled with bravado, a bite of cold eggs, an unfulfilled nest. No kisses goodbye, no have a good day. Front doors wide open while back doors slam shut. Classrooms now locked while lives are unhinging. We struggle with freedom and reap what we've wrought. Through metal detectors, past armed guards and profit, they learn locked and loaded behind threatening doors. She is 13. Wants someone to love her, but thinks she's too fat, her braces too bright. Though she'll do whatever it takes to look perfect and airbrushed, who cares that it's fake? He is 11, going on ancient, money is tight, father long gone. His face is a mask, and he's dying behind it. Alone in the corner, so much can go wrong. What makes you happy? I query these children. They're finally quiet with question mark eyes. I want to help them unclench their fists, right past the pain, rewrite their lives. I ask, what's on your mind? Their faces, blank pages, like no one but Facebook has asked them this question. This is so hard, says a girl in the back row. And I want to weep, because she's not the exception. I'd like to offer them hugs and erasers, pencils and high fives and limitless paper. A safe place for tears, a night sky to write on. Their words spilling forth like stars shooting dreams. A belief that the future is not what it seems. Okay, one more poem from the classroom. And this is called My Muse. Webster's dictionary defines muse as the spirit regarded as inspiring a poet. When I call on my muse, she looks the other way. Out the window, under her desk, twirls a strand of purple hair, imagines me invisible, acts like no one stands in front of the classroom, asking about the sound of the color red. My muse would like to kick my ass. He slouches hard in the back row, arms crossed, eyes angry, doesn't have a pen, doesn't want to borrow mine, doesn't want to be there. But when the bell rings at the end of the period, he takes his time. And when no one else is looking, he flips a tiny square of poetry on the desk in front of me and makes my day. My muse flip-flops yellow down school hallways, wears lime green high tops with black fishnet stockings. I wish I had the nerve to wear. He is a sweet 6th grader who smells like bubblegum in empty apartments, sports blue braces and a chipped front tooth, has mohawked hair and droopy drawers, and it's all I can do not to reach out and pull them up. My muse sees the world through funky glasses, a world both starlit and nightmare black, a world he wants to push away, a world he wants to cling to. A world of phantom roller coasters, and he's not tall enough to get on and ride. So he waits alone behind the fence and wonders what it's like to let go. And when he doesn't have the answers, he just might look to poetry for the words. My muse is high maintenance, a complex ballerina, a wannabe thug. When he says, "I can't write no poetry," I say, "Good, so let's write some." She says, "Poetry is a snooze fest." And I say, "Rise and shine." He says, but miss, it's hard to think." And I say, "Write that down. It's a good line for a poem." She wants to know, can she write about her best friend's brother who got shot last week? The daddy he ain't never seen? Someone's mama fighting in Iraq, another mother lost to crack, a slamming door, the bathroom bully, the kid too skinny, too short, too smart. And I weep at their rough edges, their skinned knees, the exposed poetry of their lives. My muse talks like, "That poem was dope, was ill, was whack." And I nod my head and smile, wondering, is that good or bad? And when she really wants my attention, she says, "Yo, miss, are you the poet?" And every time this happens, I am again bloodied and reborn and say, "Yes, I am the poet. When you and all of you exist, so do I." Thank you. Thank you. So these next 3 poems are short poems that were written separately, but together I think they answer the question that I'm asked often in the classroom. Why do you write? And I like to tell the kids that I write to unclench the fist that squeezes our heart, right? And it makes it hard for us to breathe or to sleep. It gives us headaches. And when you write and you unclench it, you know, we can breathe again. We can be a part of the world again. Okay, so these 3, though they were written separately, go together and, for me anyway, answer that question. And the first poem is The Telling. And I'm just going to do them all together, okay? The Telling, for my son Kevin. It starts with a little part of a song from John Cougar Mellencamp. Hold on to 16 as long as you can. Changes come around real soon, make us women and men. They're watching a Bonanza rerun on TV. My father sprawled on the couch, my mother across her favorite chair, feet dangling like a little girl. I hold tight to the sides of a wooden chair, pulled from the kitchen, rocking forward, then back, forward, back. My ears ring like the school bell between classes, and I wonder if I should study for my English exam tomorrow. But the smoke from my father's cigarette pillows my head, and I want to sink, slumber like Sleeping Beauty, believe in happy endings. I'd like a cigarette too, thank you, but the nurse at the clinic says I should quit. My heart feels like a somersault gone bad, and my hands will never be warm again. I feel stupid. When I finally speak, my mother turns toward me and says, "What? Wait for the commercial, will ya?" My chair is straight-backed. I slouch and pull in. "Don't worry about it," I say. Placing hands on my stomach, I gently probe, not feeling anything. School's out. My son weighs heavy in my arms while stadium seats shadow us from above. Rays of sun try to draw us out, but darkness rocks me, smooths my creases. I should be standing with my friends, not here in the dust. I should be stepping into the rest of my life, not trying to take care of a new life. The names of my classmates are announced, and I watch as they move forward. The noise wakes my son, and he is cranky. Wiping my nose, we turn to leave. Long and winding road by the Beatles crackles over the speakers. Tribute for Susan Casey. Your office was my safe space when at 16 I pretended not to be pregnant. I too wanted to be a teacher, and you never laughed, never said impossible. When that goal melted, moved beyond me. Now everything I do reflects who you were. The kids I write with, their lives wrapped me each day with wrinkled paper and tattered bows. In their voices, in their words, I know I make a difference. You created that certainty in me, something to hold on to when my arms were empty. And in my work, I thank you for believing. These words for you, from a 16-year-old girl, unsure of everything, except when she knocked, your door would open. Thank you. Thank you. And this is my final poem. I'd like to thank Christie for inviting me and all of you for being here and being such a wonderful audience. So this is my final piece, and it's called Speak. She speaks of her stepson, finally home after 4 tours of duty. Injured early, she thought surely he'd receive his Purple Heart and be discharged. Sent back twice more, then volunteered for his final tour, hoping all that training would help keep his comrades safe. Wanted to watch their backs. She says how her stepson can't find a job now that he's back. Skilled in the art of covert attack, he can't find work suitable to his civilian status. He doesn't expect to live here gratis, but just last month, just yesterday, jobless rates were on the rise as unsold homes and credit debt blow ugly in these tides. And if you proclaim you support the troops, we owe them more than magnetic salutes and minimum wage. Sure, he could flip burgers for less than $10, but at that rate, his life's held up. Lucky for him, most wounds have healed, and no one waits on supper. Can't help but ask who's got his back. She says how her stepson can't sleep in a bed. Mattress too soft, quilt too confining, prefers to sleep naked, alone on the floor, weapon at ready. He closes his eyes, uses the pillow to muffle his nightmares. And she wants to know who's got his back. Each Sunday at church, the names of dead soldiers are spoken out loud. Last week there were 14 and scores of civilians who all lost their lives. Brothers and husbands, mothers and wives, will they get a wall reflective in black? I don't know a soul in Kabul or Iraq, and perhaps that's the problem. Because tomorrow's headlines won't cover this war. They'll speak of the gray wolf, its looming demise, how another Bush is on the rise. and how Lindsay's heading back to court. Well, I'm sorry for the gray wolf. Wish Lohan luck with ball and chain. But Jeb is neither shock nor awe. He isn't news in this campaign. It's the families and lovers, the friends left behind. It's the pain of war trauma, of limb loss, depression. Repeat deployments with little discretion. So unless we're reaching milestones or bombs blow in the green zone, this war creeps on behind our backs, in darkened rooms, on hardwood floors, where soldiers lay, weapons ready, right here in the USA. Thank you.
Elizabeth Thomas, ladies and gentlemen. I'm pleased to announce that we have Elizabeth's splendid volume, Front of the Classroom, on sale tonight. As always, all proceeds go to the author. This gives me a chance to thank our friends at Bank Square Books. Forgive us. This gives me a chance to thank our friends at Bank Square Books for their support. Mystic is lucky to have so hip and friendly and independent bookstore. I also want to thank the Mystic Arts Center for welcoming the Arts Café-Mystic again. Our community is lucky to have such a place, and we're glad to feel at home here. For tonight's music, we're fortunate in being revisited by the brilliant forte pianist, Sylvia Berry. And yes, you heard me right. Forte piano is the name of this instrument, and it is most definitely not the parlor instrument that so many of us were abusively made to learn as children. That instrument is properly called the pianoforte. Its forerunner, the forte piano, are you following this? The forte piano was invented by the Italian harpsichord maker Bartolomeo Cristofori around 1698. You're all taking notes, aren't you? Most importantly, the forte piano, which of course means loud, soft, was the instrument on which Haydn, Mozart, and the young Beethoven composed much of their great keyboard music. Speaking of Franz Joseph Haydn, his London sonatas were recently recorded by Sylvia Berry for her first album, which Early Music magazine describes as a wonderful debut that augurs more wonders to come. I could go on to tell you that Sylvia Berry has been acclaimed for her performances as a soloist and chamber musician in the US, UK, Canada, Italy, and the Netherlands. I could mention that in Boston, where she now lives, she founded and continues to lead the ensemble Boston House Music. But rather than tell you more about her music, let's hear some of those wonders by welcoming Sylvia Berry.
The atmosphere here is very much like an 18th or early 19th century salon, because you're all reclining and you have drinks and even people are taking notes and you have programs. It's all very nice. So in fact, an instrument like this was meant to be played in a space about this size, probably a little bigger. It certainly wasn't meant for, let's say, Boston Symphony Hall, which in fact is just on the cusp of too big, but also works, you know. But these were smaller instruments for smaller venues. Mozart did cart his own instrument around, just like my husband and I cart this instrument around. Thank you, husband, to stale much there. Who also tunes the instrument for me and restored the instrument that I played on that CD, which is a piano from 1806 by John Broadwood and Son, and Haydn knew Broadwood personally. So this is all very interesting. There's all these sort of connections here, and they asked at dinner how we had met, and he's in the business of restoring these instruments, and he also plays And they said, oh, that must be why you're together. So, well, the thing that happened was that I met him in a shop where they were restoring those things, and he did come up and say, I have an unrestored 1806 Broadway. And I thought, oh, I have to at least stay friends with this guy. So I really, but then with this friend that I always came to the shop with and drove home with, I always said, should I marry that guy? And I was always kidding, but then I married him. There it is. So I just wanted to do something I would never do normally, which is read a poem by tonight's poet, Frank Bidart, because whenever I do these, I research the poet and read some of the poetry, and it helps me choose the program a little bit. And I stumbled upon this poem, For the 20th Century. And the reason I love this poem, it's really funny about the internets and the interwebs and all this. I just randomly searched, and I clicked on this one, and this one was for me. I really was. I read some other ones, but I thought, this is so great, and I just want to read it because, again, at dinner, he spoke about growing up during the advent of the recording era really taking off, and I was born at the end where it was still, I remember having LPs, and I remember my father saying, you can't touch these until your hands are big enough to have this finger in the hole in the middle, and this one on the edge, because you can't touch it with your fingers, you can't touch it. So I grew up with records. I now have children I teach who barely know what CDs are, but that, this is just crazy. But this poem is all about how you can access music and performances from the past through the amazing technology of recordings and so on. And in the second half of the poem, he mentions some artists that I had to look up. Malibran, who was a famous soprano, who was pre-recording era. Henry Irving, who was the first English actor to be knighted. I didn't know about him. And Joachim, he mentions Joachim, and this was a violinist who was really good friends with Brahms, and they played together all the time. And we know a lot about how he played. Part of what I do, I don't just play these old weird instruments, I also research how they were played and what some of the notation actually means. So we have records of Joachim, so we know a bit how he played the stuff and how Brahms thought of music. So but we don't have any recordings, that's true. So this is not what I do every day, but I'm going to try to read this poem. So, by Frank Bidart, For the 20th Century. Bound, hungry to pluck again from the thousand technologies of ecstasy. Boundlessness, the world that at a drop of water rises without boundaries. I push the play button. Callous, Laurel and Hardy, Tegedi, you are alive again. The slow movement of K218, once again no longer bland, merely pretty, nearly banal as it is in all but Tegedi's hands. Therefore you and I and Mozart must thank the 20th century, for it made you pattern, form whose infinite repeatability within matter defies matter. Malibran, Henry Irving, the young Joachim, they are lost. A mountain of newspaper clippings become words, not their own words. The art of the performer. Thank you. So when he mentions K218, that's the Kirschel number. So a lot of composers have catalog numbers next to their music. So I looked that up. That's the Mozart violin concerto in G major. D major, one of the Mozart violin concertos. In any event, I said, well, I have to play Mozart now, because I know this man listens to Mozart. So first I'm playing two short sonatas by Antonio Soler. He's a Spanish composer, born in 1729, died in 1783. So this is a direct contemporary of Haydn, Mozart, and Beethoven. And he was Catalan, actually, which is very interesting. And you will hear some influences of Scarlatti. He's after Scarlatti, but you also hear the classic era definitely creeping in. Then I'm playing 12 variations by Mozart on the French vaudeville tune, A vous dérangez, maman. And you will know this as Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, or the ABC song. But what the French text really meant, what the song really meant, it's A vous dérangez, maman. It says, Mother, I need to tell you, it happened. I know it shouldn't have, but I did it. So whatever. This is not Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. And then I'll play two really short works by Beethoven. One is a slow movement from a sonatina. It has a pedagogical purpose. It's fairly gorgeous though, and nobody plays it. And the Bagatelle in A-flat major, opus 33, which is Beethoven at his funniest. And usually I do explain the instrument, but I've taken my talk time. So if you want to ask me about it, you can ask me or my husband there, and we'll tell you more. And I did bring a program you can read later. So thank you so much. Thank you so much. Playing that is the closest I can get to feeling like a jazz musician. Because Mozart improvised those things in concert. You know, if you read Mozart's letters, there's one variation set that he writes to his father. Well, you know, I just improvised this thing at a concert last night. I'm going to write it down. It was pretty good. So, so that's, if you can play with the time a little bit, and you try to feel like maybe he did, like maybe, you know, but yeah, I had to work really hard at that. He didn't have to work. But I love it.
I've looked forward to introducing tonight's featured poet. Frank Bidart is generally regarded as one of America's most important poets. He won last year's National Book Critics Circle Award for a brilliant collection of poems called Metaphysical Dog. His previous 7 books have won several more of the most coveted laurels, including the Bollingen Prize, the PEN/Volcker Award, the Bobbitt Prize from the Library of Congress, among many others. And his books have been finalists multiple times for the Pulitzer and National Book Award. Along the way, he has written a few poems that have become justifiably famous, poems that every student in poetry encounters in anthologies, including Herbert White, Ellen West, The War of Václav Nijinsky, and the Hour of the Night series. Indeed, Frank Bidart has patiently amassed a profound and original, has amassed as profound and original a body of work as any written in this century. I didn't say that. The great poet and critic Louise Glick did, however. And though Ms. Glick asserts that Mr. Bidart has, as I say, patiently amassed his body of work, I would protest that there is nothing patient about this poet or his poetry, that every one of his poems is notable for an urgency and an emotional freight which contend that every moment of life is fraught with importance, that nothing about life should for a moment be taken for granted. There's no reason for you to accept my word for this. Mr. Bidart's poems speak wonderfully well for themselves. But in his National Book Critics Circle Award-winning book, Metaphysical Dog, a marvel of a book, as in all of his books and poems, you should be alert to his most important themes, themes that have preoccupied him during 40 years of work, including the evanescence and power of memory, the irreconcilable entanglements of family, the infuriating elusiveness of God, and above all, the constant struggle to understand who we are and how we live at peace with that person. Through the years, Mr. Bidart has engaged these hugely ambitious considerations with deep emotional honesty that makes his work sometimes painful, but always essential to read. My friends, it is good luck to have the privilege of introducing Frank Bidart. It is much better luck to hear him read his poems. So won't you please join me in welcoming Frank Bidart.
Thank you, Christie, for that extraordinary introduction. What can I do but disappoint? I love the translation that Sylvia gave us of the Mozart. Oh, Mother, let me tell you, I know I shouldn't have done it, but I did it. It's wonderful. I think a great deal of art is summed up by that. I'm going to read poems from Metaphysical Dog and one new poem at the end. Tonight at dinner, we had dinner with Chris Greenleaf, who's a recording engineer. And I exclaimed when I learned he was a recording engineer. You know, I never had dinner with a recording engineer. And thank you, Sylvia, for reading that poem, but I mean, I am so grateful to these people who have preserved performances for us, because so much of how I think about life, how much I value instances of art, have to do with great performances. You know, we have W.C. Fields because of movies. We would not, you know, if we were living 100 years earlier, I think that's accurate, not 100 years. Anyway, if we were living in the 18th century, we would not have W.C. Fields or Laurel and Hardy, or we wouldn't have Callis, we wouldn't have Zaghetti, we wouldn't have Marlon Brando. And anyway, the idea of having dinner with someone who was part of the tradition of making available to us the art of performance that had been lost 100 years earlier, that would have been lost 100 years earlier, just seemed to me very thrilling. So, Chris, I thank you. The first poem I'm going to read tonight is about a film, not a very good film, a film with Ava Gardner called Pandora and the Flying Dutchman. And it's one of the difficulties of the poem is that I have to tell the plot of the movie. And I will read another poem in which alludes to another narrative. So I hope you can absorb these other narratives in the process of listening to a poem. In any case, as I say, it's not a very good film, but I've certainly found, I think many people have found, that you can sometimes get caught up in and see yourself in a situation of film that is itself not a good work of art, or very flawed, uneven work of art, that nonetheless catches one, and that somehow one is implicated in the course of the work. This is called He is Ava Gardner. He is Ava Gardner at the height of her beauty, in Pandora and the Flying Dutchman. I had allowed him to become, for me, necessity. I was not ever for him necessity. An adornment, yes, a grace note, not necessity. Everyone, the men at least, are crazy about Pandora. She's smart, self-deprecating, funny. She who has seen seemingly everything about love and says she has no idea what love is. Who knows the world finds her beautiful, so that she must test every man, and slightly disgusted find him wanting. Clearly, she is not in this crowd of men eager to please her, to flatter and bring her drinks, found someone who is for her necessity. Watching Pandora and the Flying Dutchman, you feel sympathy for the beautiful who cannot find anyone who is for them necessity. He is Ava Gardner at the height of her beauty. You knew you'd never fall for someone not up. You watch her test each suitor. She sings about love to an old friend, a poet. He asks her to marry him. After she again refuses, you see him slip something into his drink, and he dies, poisoned. She says he has tried that too many times. Now she feels nothing. Promising nothing, she asks the famous race car driver, who also wants to marry her, to shove the car he has worked on for months over the cliff into the sea. He does. In the first flush of pleasure, she agrees to marry him. The next day, he has the car's carcass, pouring water, dragged up from the sea. You are the learned, amused professor surrounded by his collections, who carefully pieces together fragments of Greek pots. You know it is foolish to become another suitor. Hors de combat, soon you are the only one she trusts. At moments, you become her confessor. Then she meets the Dutchman. He offers little, asks nothing. When she withdraws her attention, he isn't spooked. Because when she meets him, he is painting the portrait of someone who has her face. With petulance, she scrapes off the face. He charmingly makes the head a blank ovoid and says, "That's better." She thinks that she is the knife that cutting him will heal him. You know she is right. You have discovered he is the fabled Dutchman, who for centuries has sailed the world seas, unable to die though he wants to die. You know what it is to want to die. His reasons are a little contrived, a mechanism of the plot, reasons that Pandora at the end discovers. He murdered centuries earlier, through jealousy and paranoia, his wife. Now, unless he can find a woman willing to die out of love for him, sail out with him and drown, he cannot ever find rest. This logic makes sense to her. She who does not believe in love will perform an act proving its existence. She wants, of course, to throw her life away. The Dutchman will always arrive because that's what she wants. Those of us who look on, who want the proximate and partial to continue, loathe the hunger for the absolute. All your life you have watched as two creatures think they have found in each other necessity. Watched as the shell then closes for a time around them. You envy them as you gather with the rest of the village, staring out to sea when she swims out to the boat to give herself. Both succeed at last in drowning. Couples stay together when each of the two remains a necessity for the other, which you cannot know until they cease to be. Tautology that is the sum of what you know. He's a master. He's lived by becoming the master of the alchemy that makes, as you stare into some one person's eyes, makes you adore him. Eyes that say that despite the enormous landscapes that divide you, you are brothers. He too is trapped in all that divides soul from soul. Then suddenly he is fluttering his finger ends between yours. He rises from the table, explains he had no sleep last night, and leaves. You couldn't worm your way into becoming for him necessity. When did he grow bored with seduction and confessors and find the Dutchman? For months there has been nothing but silence. When you sent him a pot only you could have with care pieced together from the catastrophe of history, more silence. The enterprise is abandoned. something there is in me that makes me think I need this thing, that gives this thing the illusion of necessity. As enthralled to flesh as I, he could not see beneath this old face I now wear, this ruinous, ugly body, that I am the Dutchman. But nobody knows when living where necessity lies. Maybe later, if history is lucky, the urn will not refuse to be pieced together. This is neither good nor bad. It is what is. This is a very short poem. It's called Name the Bed. Half light, just after dawn. As you turn back at the doorway, you to whom the ordinary sensuous world seldom speaks, expected to see in the thrown-off bed, rumpled bedclothes, nothing. Screams stretched across it. Someone wanted more from that bed than they found there. Name the bed that's not true of. Bed where your twin died. Eraser bed. This is a poem about a poem I wrote long ago called Ellen West. It's called Writing Ellen West. Ellen West, the poem is based on an essay by a man named Ludwig Binswanger. Great essay. It's about a woman who was anorexic before the word anorexic seemed to exist. He does not use the word. The poem again attempts to tell at least the center of the poem in the process of talking about writing it. Writing Ellen West. Writing Ellen West was exorcism. Exorcism of that thing within Frank that wanted, after his mother's death, to die. Inside him was that thing that he must expel from him to live. He read The Case of Ellen West as a senior in college and immediately wanted to write a poem about it, but couldn't, so he stored it, as he has stored so much that awaits existence. Unlike Ellen, he was never anorexic, but like Ellen, he was obsessed with eating and the arbitrariness of gender and having to have a body. Ellen lived out the war between the mind and the body, lived out in her body each stage of the war, its journey and progress, in which compromise, reconciliation is attempted, then rejected, then mourned, till she reaches at last in an ecstasy costing not less than everything, death. He was grateful he was not impelled to live out the war in his body, hiding in compromise, well wadded with art he adored and with stupidity and distraction. The particularity inherent in almost all narrative, though contingent and exhausting, tells the story of the encounter with particularity that flesh, as flesh, must make. Ellen West was written in the year after his mother's death. By the time she died, he had so thoroughly betrayed the ground of intimacy on which his life was founded. He had no right to live. No use for him to tell himself that he shouldn't feel this, because he felt this. He didn't think this, but he thought this. After she died, his body wanted to die, but his brain, his cunning, didn't. He likes narratives with plots that feel as if no one wills them. His mother, in her last year, revealed that she wanted him to move back to Bakersfield and teach at Bakersfield College and live down the block. He thought his mother, without knowing that this is what she wanted him to die. All he had told her in words and more than words for years was that her possessiveness and terror at his independence were wrong, wrong, wrong. He was the only person she wanted to be with. But he refused to live down the block. And then she died. And must be lifted from the mind, must be lifted and placed elsewhere, must not remain in the mind alone. Out of the thousand myriad voices, thousand myriad stories in each human head, when his mother died, there was Ellen West. This is the body that you can draw out of you to expel from you the desire to die. Give it a voice. Give each scene of her life a particularity and necessity that in Binswanger's recital are absent. Enter her skin so that you can then make her other and expel her, survive her. Animal mind, eating the ground of Western thought, the mind-body problem. She who in the last months of her life abandoned writing poems in disgust at the failure of her poems is a poem. She in death is incarnated on a journey whose voice is the voice of her journey. Arrogance of Plutarch, of Shakespeare and Berlioz, who thought they made what Cleopatra herself could not make. Arrogance of the maker. Werther killed himself, and then young men all over Europe imitated him and killed themselves, but his author, Goethe, cunning master of praxis, lived. Frank thought when anything is made, it is made not by its likeness, not by its twin or mirror, but its opposite. Ellen, in his poem, asks, without a body, who can know himself at all? In your pajamas, you move down the stairs just to the point where the adults couldn't yet see you. To hear more clearly the din, the sweet cacophony of adults partying. Phonograph voices among them. Phonograph voices, their magpie beauty. Sweet din, magpie beauty. One more poem, one more book in which you figure out how to make something out of not knowing enough. Once again, we get a phonograph. I'll read 4 more poems, none of which are as long as the one I just read. Mouth. It was as if starving, his stomach rebelled at food. As quickly as he ate, it passed right through him. His body refused what his body needed. Recipe for death. But he said, what others think is food isn't food. It passed right through him. He shoved meat into his mouth, but still his body retained nothing, absorbed nothing. He grows thinner. He thinks he cannot live on nothing. He has the persistent sense that whatever object he seeks is not what he seeks. Now he repeats the litany of his choices. Love, which always to his surprise exhilarated even as it tormented and absorbed him. Unendingly under everything. Art. Trying to make a work of art he can continue to inhabit. The choices he said he made almost without choosing. The best times, I must confess, are when one cannot help oneself. Has his pride at his intricate inventions come to nothing? Nothing he can now name or touch is food. Sex was the bed where you learned to be naked and not naked at the same time. Bed where you learn to move the unsustainable weight inside. Then too often lost the key to it. Faces too close that despite themselves promise, then out of panic, disappoint. Not just out of panic, only in his mind is he freely both here and not here. The imperious or imagined needs of those you love or think you love demand you forget that when you smell your flesh, you smell unfulfillment. We are creatures, he thinks, caught in an obscure, ruthless economy. His hunger grows as whatever his mouth fastens upon fails to feed him. Recipe for death. But he's sure he'll learn something once he sees La Notte again. He's placed Duino elegies next to his bed. He craves the cold catechism Joyce mastered writing Ithaca. Now he twists within the box. He cannot exit or rise above. He thinks he must die when what will not allow him to retain food makes him see his body has disappeared. 3 more poems. This is called Elegy for Earth. Because Earth's inmates travel in flesh and hide from flesh and adore flesh, you hunger for flesh that does not die. But hunger for the absolute breeds hatred of the absolute. Those who are the vessels of revelation, or who think that they are, ravage us with the promise of rescue. My mother outside in the air, waving shriveled as if she knew this is the last time. Watching as I climbed the stairs and the plane swallowed me. She and I could no more change what we hurtled toward than we could change the weather. Finding my seat, unseen, I stared back as she receded. They drop into holes in the earth. Everything you loved and hated, as you will drop. And the moment when all was possible, gone. You are still above earth, the moment when all and nothing is possible, long gone. Terrified of the sea, we cling to the hull. In adolescence, you thought your work ancient work. to decipher at last human beings' relation to God. Decipher love, to make what was once whole, whole again, or to see why it never should have been thought whole. Earth was a tiny labyrinthine ball orbiting another bigger ball, so bright you can go blind staring at it. When the source of warmth and light withdraws, then terrible winter. When burning and relentless it draws too close, the narcotically gorgeous, fecund earth withers as if the sun taught us what we will ever know of the source. Now, too far, then too close. Blood Island, where you for a time lived. This is the last poem in the book, and I'll read one more after it. For an unwritten opera. Once you had a secret love. Seeing even his photo, a window was flung open high in the airless edifice that is you. Though everything looks as if it is continuing just as before, it is not. It is continuing in a new way. Sweet lingo, O'Hara and Ashbery teach. That's not how you naturally speak. You tell yourself first that he is not the air you need. Second, that you loathe air. As a boy, you despised the world for replacing God with another addiction, love. Despised yourself. Was there no third thing? But every blue moon, the skeptical, the adamantly disabused, find themselves, like you, returned to life by a secret, like him in you. Now you understand Janacek at 70, in love with a much younger married woman, chastely writing her. As in Mozart, song remains, no matter how ordinary, how flawed the personae. For us poor mortals, private accommodations, magpie beauty. Now, I think I have to go back. I forgot the page I was going to bring. 1 second. Yes, thank you. I'm publishing a collected poems next spring, and there's going to be a section of new poems at the end, and this is going to be the last poem in that. I'm now 75, which is amazing. Not possible, but somehow has happened. This was written when I was 74. And it's a dream of seeing the earth, and one has died and is looking back at it. And suddenly this is in the dream, I had this immense pleasure at looking at it. And the poem is about that. Visions at 74. The planet turns there without you. Beautiful. Exiled by death, you cannot touch it. Weird joy to watch postulates lived out and discarded. Something crowded inside us, always craving to become something glistening outside us. The relentless planet showing itself the logic of what is buried inside it. To love existence is to love what is indifferent to you, you think, as you watch it turn there, beautiful. World that can know itself only by world. Soon it must colonize and infect the stars. You are an hypothesis made of flesh. What you will teach the stars is constant rage at the constant prospect of not being. Sometimes when I wake, it's because I hear a knock. Knock, knock. 2 knocks, quite clear. I wake and listen. It's nothing. Thank you.
Frank Bidart, ladies and gentlemen. Did you hear that? That sounded like great poetry to me. Thank you, Frank. And thanks also to Sylvia Berry and Elizabeth Thomas. For those of you who would like to take Frank Bidart home tonight, we have instead some of his books, including The Brilliant Metaphysical Dog, on sale, which he would be glad to sign for you. Don't forget that the Arts Cafe will reconvene on May 15th with Mark Doty and the J. Hunter Group. And remember, the Arts Cafe, my friends, is a tribute to you. This is community, and doesn't it feel good? Thanks so much.